All right, happy Wednesday. Welcome to Behind the Point Spread. I'm Travis Justice. Good to have you along as we take a look at the National Football League and college football. Before we get started tonight, just a couple of reminders. If you happen to like this show and like this video, go ahead and give it a like. It's very simple. Just hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, very simple. Just hit the subscribe button. You'll be ready to go. And whenever we put out content, you'll be able to be one of the first ones to see it. And, of course, it's an interactive show. We'll give more about that later, but the comment section is there, whether you're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and, yes, YouTube. Go ahead and leave your comments in the comment section. Let's bring in the stars of the show. To my right, or my left over here, be the one and only Scott Spreitzer. And the smart guy gets the whole bottom to himself. That's Dr. Rob Zatechka. What's up, Doc?
I'm the foundation.
Look at that. Very, very good. The foundation. Rob, you're going to be happy about this because Scott listens to the podcast. He listens to the podcast. Did you know that?
Well, I did because he keeps telling us Dylan Raiola is going to transfer.
Dylan Raiola is not going to transfer, but Scott listens to the podcast, and he heard you this past week when we recorded on Sunday, and you were talking about field position. Remember that? We were talking about Behind the Point Spread and how smart Scott Spreitzer is.
He's a pretty bright guy.
He's a pretty bright guy. He's a mathematician. And we were talking about field position and how important it is to, scoring and wins and losses and all sorts of things. So, Scott, being the smart guy that you are, you heard us what we requested, and you came with information tonight. You came loaded. You came ready to play.
Yeah, I wrote some stuff down here from a study that was done by another sports betting group a few years ago. And it hasn't changed much. This is a few years ago. You want me to jump into it and tell you?
Just jump right into it because I'm anxious to hear this.
Yeah, so, I'm listening to the show, and I tuned in. First of all, I wanted to tune in to see why Doc Rob gave Nebraska special teams an F+, and you described it. I mean, seriously, I was like, wow, you know what? I was thinking C-, and the more you explained the reasons, the more I was on board. I mean, that's, I thought it was well done. And
anytime I can get Scott to agree with me, I can get Scott to agree with me, that's a good thing.
I mean, after listening to you, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, you made me think about some things other than, wow, he kicked a 54-yarder and he kicked a 40-something-yarder, which was great. But as you said, that was the plus part of the F+. And then when you described, how they were costing themselves field position by not being able to catch a punt and run with it, when you got all that open field, it just added up and it made sense. So I'm on board, Doc Rob, as usual. When I hear you explain something at the collegiate level and the NFL level, I mean, I've heard you probably know a thing or two about actually playing the game than Travis and I do put together. So that's what they tell me at least.
And he's already bragging. He's going, yeah, just a little bit.
That's only about Travis. I don't know about Scott. So. The data analysis of this is still mind-blowing to me.
And you're right. I don't know much about the game. I just know the right questions to ask. How's that?
So I jumped in and I looked and I found a few things that I remembered when you were talking about it, about seeing something like this a few years ago, more than a couple, but a few years ago. And it still makes sense. And here's some averages. First of all, if you have field position margin range of 20 plus yards or more than your opponent. So basically what you're talking about is, let's say throughout the entire length of a football game, team A is starting from their 40 on average, and team B is starting from inside their own 20 on average. So 20 yards or more field position margin range. A few years ago when this was done, the study, 4% of the games in football fit that prerequisite or those parameters. And of those games, 97% of the teams with that 20 or more yardage advantage, 97% of those teams won the football game. The average margin of victory, the average scoring margin, 32.4 points per game, including the 3% of the games that lost, that 32.4. So I just went down the list. Okay, 15 to 20 yards, 93% of the teams won. All the way down. How about this? If you just have a 6 to 10 yard field position margin range, 6 to 10 yards on average in a game, you won your game 78% of the time. And the average margin, scoring margin, was almost 16 points per game, just 6 to 10 yards on average of field position. So I thought it was pretty eye-opening. I forgot how dramatic it was. Even a 3 to 6 yard field position margin range, 3 to 6 yards. You're averaging getting the ball at your 23-yard line. The other team's averaging getting the ball at their own 20-yard line. You won the game 60% of the time, just 3 to 6 yards advantage by more than 6 points per game. So this made me think about guys like Urban Meyer. We talked a few weeks ago, we were talking special teams. We brought up what happened in Blacksburg, Virginia for all those years. So it made me think about Urban Meyer and how much he cared about field position and talked about it when he's the coach of Ohio State. And I went back and found this little saying here. Urban Meyer said when he was at Ohio State, a player must earn time on special teams before he can play offense or defense for me. And you saw starters, on offense and defense playing special teams. We talked about one of the reasons I like Barry Odom, the former Mizzou coach, who's now turned things around at UNLV like nobody's ever done before. He has starters on special teams. Ricky White, All-American receiver, transfer from Michigan State, one of the quickest players you're going to see in college football, wide receiver. He's going in the NFL in the first round next year. This guy's on special teams blocking punts. So I'm telling you, look at all this information. I thought, I'm hiring a coach and I'm an AD. What do you think about special teams? Who do you play? Who do you put on special teams? Do you put spot? I want to know what their thought is on field position margin right off the bat. The only stat that I found that maybe means more than this is explosive plays, a team's amount of explosive plays per game over another's. And the hard part about quantifying that is that some people say 12-yard run, 16-yard pass is an explosive play. Others say 15-yard run, 25-yard pass is an explosive play. So it's really hard to kind of really get a good tight grip on it. But this field position margin range, that tells the story. You hit it on the head. You've got to be able to return a punt once in a while, especially when your blockers in front of you have cleared a path for 10 yards in front of you and you're doing this.
Well, let's use Iowa as an example, right? Caden Weegan is one of those punt return guys that's giving Iowa the ball at the 30, 35. You want to know why and go over history with Cooper DeJean. Everybody goes, well, Iowa plays such a boring style of football. They play a field position game. They want to flip the field. And that's, I'd probably say that's probably why Iowa's really successful is they're starting at their 35, 40 most of the time instead of the 10 or 15.
Absolutely.
Or even the 20. If you've got kind of like what Scott said, you do that breakdown. If they're one team starting on their 20 and Iowa starting on their 35, well, what was that, Scott? 78%?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. 6 to 10 yards average margin advantage. You got a 78% chance of winning your football game. And,
that was 78. Yeah. It's up 93 if it's a 15-yard, I think.
93 was 15 to 20.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's all of a sudden those numbers, you realize how big a difference that is. But that's why I was so upset about the special teams. As I'm sitting here thinking, we're losing. In a game like that against Ohio State, where it was a 4-point loss, you leave one touchdown on the field, you've lost the game. And I'm willing to look, when you look at the course of the special teams, that entire game, in my opinion, we left a touchdown out there.
Well, Rob, you remember when we started, our first two diagnosis plays were the first kickoff return and the first punt. And you said that cost Nebraska the game because you had the ball, inside the 8 at that point, and then you kicked a punt that ended up at like the 30.
Yeah, all of a sudden that field's flipped and you're backed up. They've got the field position advantage and they held on to it for a good chunk of that first quarter.
And that points per game scoring margin, on 6 to 10 yards on the average advantage, 16 points a game. That's serious stuff, and you're not talking about having to get an 80-yard punt return. Just get 10 yards on your punt return. Give yourself 10 yards of an advantage when you're the return team. So it really was cool because I did watch it for the reason to see why they got an F+. I was thinking again, C-, maybe something like that. And it really did make a ton of sense. And, I could see why you were so good in school. It was like a thought process that goes deeper than 99% of the people.
Well, and everybody sees the 3 long field goals and the thought that goes through their head is like, well, that's great special teams. It's like, well, yeah, it is. But if you think about special teams compared to say like offense and defense, let's take defense, for example. Let's say you get 3 or 4 sacks in a game And it's easy to look at that and go like, oh, well, our defense got 4 sacks. We've got a great defense.
Mm.
Well, what if that same defense also gave up 310 yards rushing?
Sure.
Well, okay, well, that's not so great. And you're probably, if you're giving up, your
Yeah.
defense is giving up 300 yards rushing, you're probably going to lose that game.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of some of these stats that jump out, and I'm looking at that going, okay, well, same thing, I mean, compared to offense. I mean, if you can say, hey, our quarterback had 380 yards passing. Well, what if as a team you had minus 27 yards rushing and you get marched up and down the field, but then you also had a few turnovers, you didn't punch the ball in, you didn't actually score points.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden you're sitting there going, okay, well, the one stat looks great, but that's not a great offensive day if you turn the ball over 3 times and don't actually score any points in the game and you give up minus yardage rushing. That's a bad day on offense. I don't care how many yards passing you have. Same thing on special teams. If okay, great, they got 3 long field goals, and those points. It kept Nebraska in the game. The punt return game just wasn't quite there. The kickoff return game just wasn't quite there. There was all these little mistakes that they had to burn a timeout on a special teams play. I mean, there's all these other things that play into it, that it's special teams is not just kicking field goals. So, but yeah, the field position is the thing that always kills me, because I always I see a guy make and I'm watching it in real time in the game, and I'm just going, oh my gosh, we just lost 10 to 12 yards of offense right there. Yeah. I was like, that's hard.
You gave an example that I can recall from that video. You gave an example the other day of Nebraska calling a fair catch on a punt when there was no defender within 12 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to get at least 8 yards out of that return, at least. Even though you got a 12-yard cushion, maybe the guy makes it up as you're running towards each other. But if you can't make that first guy miss, you're still getting 7 or 8 yards of field position. And I just broke down how much 3 yards matters, let alone 7 or 8, So I'm glad you guys did that video. I'm so glad you gave it an F+, because I don't think we would have, dug into it as much as I did the last couple of days after seeing that. And, again, the sexy part was the field goals. Nobody looks at the stuff that's not all that sexy. Sex sells. The field goals were the sex part of the special teams. But, you talked about how, you could have 4 sacks, but you gave up all these yards rushing. When you look at explosive plays, somebody online gave an example. I can't remember if it was Georgia, Kentucky, where Georgia barely won, or if it was a close game for Georgia last year. But they were talking about how Kentucky actually allowed fewer yards than Georgia. But if you looked at explosive plays, it was like 5-1 Georgia. And explosive plays, I mean, you outdo the other team in explosive plays, and you're going to win that football game, rates that are almost like this, like the field position margin range. So I just think you really got to, I look at drive charts. It's funny, guys, I Saturday night, if I'm not a total waste case, I don't mean from drinking or anything, but if I'm not a total waste case from betting in game all day long on a Saturday from 9 a.m. Pacific time till 10 o'clock at night, I start jumping in about 11 p.m. I'll take a quick 1-hour nap. I'll make a pot of coffee, and I start looking at drive charts. And drive charts, I mean, you can see a game that's 42-28, and the team that scored 42 points never had a drive that started in their own territory. They got good fortune on their side. It's such a big part of handicapping, to look at drive charts and see how they're actually scoring.
Scott, people are very observant, by the way. Brian writes in, Scott with the timeline always fashionable Blue Jay hat in the background. So you're a Jaysker is what I'm interpreting here. I
grew up a Blue Jay fan. I was a Hilltopper, and I tell you, we got basketball college starting on Monday. And the one thing I haven't done this year yet is make a big bet on a team to win the national title. Last year, by September 3rd of last year, I had Purdue at 16-1 for a dime. And they got all the way, as you saw, Final Four championship game. And I think I texted Travis during the game, Dr. Rob, and I said, no, I'm not hedging. I'm just going to either collect 16K or I'm going to lose a dime. But I haven't made my bet yet. Hopefully by next week, we'll only be 2 days into the college basketball season, and I can tell you what I did. But that Creighton had back there, besides being a big Blue Jay fan, when I'm sitting at my desk doing my work, like right now it's behind me, but when I switch things around and I'm actually working on the games, that's to my right. I cannot leave my office without seeing get your ass ready for college basketball. It starts on Monday. So a bit of a reminder there also.
Hey, Rob, Michael's pushing back. An F is a fail. Special teams did not fail. They need improvement. That's a D. The rating of F plus is ridiculous. Just ridiculous,
Well,
Rob.
I mean, I kind of have fun with the F. I mean,
Yes.
there's no such thing as an F plus. I mean,
That's
everybody,
the point.
it's either D minus or you flunked.
Yes.
I put it out there because it does catch people's attention. It was a D. It was a D. I mean, Michael's right. It was a D grade. I want people to talk about it, and then it gives us something to kind of hone in on. And so that's why I put it out there like that. But yeah, Michael's right. It was a D. It was a D effort.
You've
But
heard
if you gave it a D, I wouldn't have jumped into it. You know what I mean? So
Exactly. I had to do
plus,
something
was,
to get Scott busting
exactly.
down the numbers.
I mean, it's great. You caught everybody's attention, including mine.
You've heard Scott talk tonight. Great numbers from him. If you want more great numbers from Scott, you can work with Scott one-on-one. Text the word Doc Talk to the number 29022 and get a free $60 trial of the premium member picks from Scott, or go to docsports.com and sign up for the free 60 on the upper left-hand side of the website. Of course, this is an interactive show. A lot of you are already leaving comments in the comment section. We appreciate that. We'll get to as many of those comments as we can, but if you want to participate by just calling in the show, yes, this is a call-in show. You can call 402-543-5556. That's 402-543-5556. Corey's writing in for Dr. Rob, says Rob is just trying to get enough emphasis on it to where certain coaches hear about it. Fix the damn special teams, right?
I would love that. Well,
Yeah.
I wish somebody would listen down there.
I think people listen down there. I do. I know
I
certain
do.
people do.
Yeah. I mean, I do worry a little bit about, and I'm not sure worry is the right way to phrase it. I do wonder what kind of impact this has on a guy like Foley as the special teams coach. Is that a change that gets made in the off season? And I don't know. I mean, I like the guy. He seems like a wonderful human being and has already established some really good relationships. He's like the local recruiting guy for Nebraska. So he's the guy that's going out to all of the different high schools and establishing those relationships. You kind of hate to break that and start all over again. But man, the product on the field is just not there.
All right, here are the games we're looking at tonight. We're going to do one out of the National Football League. A big game coming up Sunday night as the Lions travel to Green Bay to take on the Packers. Then we move on to college football. We've got a big showdown against Pitt and SMU that has maybe some playoff implications, especially for Pitt. Then it's the Big Ten from there on out. Wisconsin against Iowa for the Heartland Trophy. Big game in Happy Valley as Ohio State takes on Penn State. Definitely some playoff implications there. And then we'll wrap things up with UCLA and Nebraska. So our first game up, Scott's going to be the National Football League. Let's go to the Detroit Green Bay game. I took these lines off DraftKings about an hour ago. Again, these fluctuate at all times, kind of like the stock market. But the last report I had, Lions at 3.5 and the over-under at 48.5.
Yeah, that's pretty much right. I mean, a few hours ago, that total was about 47.5. So it's gone up at DK a little bit there. Jordan Love, he's been okay this season, but nothing like he was over the final half of last year. And he's been banged up basically the entire season, missed a couple of games. Didn't practice on Wednesday. We're cutting this on Wednesday evening. He did not practice on Wednesday. He's got the groin injury that he's nursing. If he can't go, it's not like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Malik Willis, who looked like he didn't belong in the league a couple of years ago, goes to Green Bay, and he's got a great quarterback-friendly coach in Matt LaFleur and that offensive coaching staff. And he looks like arguably the best backup quarterback in the NFL in 2024. He did play against Indy, and I know a lot of people are going to say, well, he played against Tennessee. Well, Tennessee's offense obviously stinks on ice, but the defense is outstanding for the Titans. They just have no offense to counter things. I look at the Lions, man. That offensive line is dominant, best offensive line in football. They run the ball well. They're solid through the air. They've got great targets for Jared Goff. You do have to take into your handicapping a little bit that this game's outdoors and not in a dome, because Goff's metrics are a little bit swayed when he's inside instead of outside. But it's so tough, guys, to go against Detroit. I mean, under Dan Campbell, they've played 61 games. They've covered at a 71% rate. They've covered 8 of the last 10 as road chalk. And then check out these numbers. Detroit is 8-0 against the spread against teams that have won at least 75% of their games on the season. And they outscore those teams, Detroit, by an average of 31-22. number 1 in several defensive metrics, number 3 in yards per play margin. I just think, as much as I hate playing against a division road favorite, I have to lean towards Detroit in this one, minus the 3.5. And again, if Jordan Love doesn't play, that number's probably going to go up a little bit more if they announce that in the next 48 hours. So it might be one of those things where if you like Detroit, you jump in now. If he doesn't, if you like Green Bay, you jump in. Excuse me, I'll say it again. If you like Detroit, you jump in now. If you like Green Bay, you can wait and see if Love is going to play, or it's going to be Malik Willis.
442-403-5556. Let's go to the phones. That's where Steve is. Steve, welcome to Behind the Point Spread. What's going on, Steve?
Hey, I apologize if I missed part of the show if this has already been discussed, but I was just impressed with the John Hole. Those field goals weren't cheap, or they weren't flukes. They were right down the middle, and he hit those solid. And I called in a few years ago, or a year or two ago, and I was critical of Alvano, and I wonder if you think that John Hole is the guy now as the field goal kicker for Nebraska.
I think he's definitely the field goal kicker now. Now here's the thing, and this is the big caveat for a lot of those guys is, does he stay healthy? For most of these kickers, usually the thing that gets them at some point and causes some issues, it's usually things like hip flexor injuries, quadricep injuries, ankle injuries, stuff like that, where you think it's like, well, it can't be that bad. But it's a lot of start-stop, real sudden explosive movements. And so it does predispose these guys to kind of this unique subset of injuries that they do get when you see a guy go kind of fall off a little bit. That's usually what's happened. With Hole, he's one of those guys that I think he's got a lot of confidence. He's got a great leg. The length is there. He can get it down the field, and his accuracy has been spot on the last couple weeks. If he stays healthy, it's his job.
You know what I liked also about it, Rob and Travis?
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
I like the fact that it was a high-pressure situation on those field goals. It's at Ohio State,
It's a close game.
It's a close game. It's at Ohio State. You're not kicking field goals up 2 or 3 touchdowns against UTEP in the first half. The mental aspect of those made field goals means a lot to me too.
Yeah. By the way, Steve was calling from Las Vegas, Scott. So he must be your neighbor down there. He could have just walked over and asked you the question at the house.
That person we just heard from, or another one?
Yeah, no, the person we just heard from he was from Las Vegas. I can see. I can see where
like Dr. Tom to me a little bit. So
I can see where everybody's calling from.
Hey, so going back to that Lions-Packers game, if it is Malik Willis that plays, how much does that change a line? And I understand what you said. He's having a good year. I think he also led him to a win over Jacksonville. So you got a guy who obviously can play. It's not like he's your classic clipboard holder. This is a guy who can actually play football and lead a team to wins. If Love doesn't play, what is the change you see in that line?
It's a good question. Now, let me just say this. Last year in the second half of the season, I would have made it 6 points, the difference. This year, I'd say 5. Okay. So I think the drop-off is worth 4.5 to 5. If Malik Willis wouldn't have played yet this year, started the game, it'd be more than that. But he's proven himself. And that's the thing, is everybody knows that Matt LaFleur and that offensive staff are quarterback friendly. And they just get the most out of every quarterback that plays under them. So I would say, to me, my own ratings would be 4.5 to 5 points this year.
All right, let's jump into the college game. We're going to do this will be a good one on Saturday night. I'm going to take one from Colin Cowherd as he used it against Iowa a couple of years ago back in 2015. Pitt is unbeaten. The Holstein kid is banged up at quarterback. They don't know if they're going to play him at quarterback at SMU. Is Pitt the fake ID of college football, Scott? Is Pitt the fake ID of college football?
I won't go that far, to say that they're the fake ID. And that doesn't mean that I don't think they're going to go in here and lose. I do think they're the wrong side here, especially with Holstein a little bit banged up and listed as questionable. He's a good quarterback. He's not elite, but he's good. He doesn't make dumb moves or dumb mistakes. And I'm watching the game last week for Pitt, and they picked off Kyle McCord 5 times. I'm not sure I've ever seen this before. They had 3 pick sixes in the first half of that game. The offense only gained 4.9 yards per play throughout the 4 quarters against the Orange. But again, they were just picking off every pass. The concerning part of this thing for me, for the Pitt Panthers, is that they give up, they're 112th in passing yards allowed per game. At SMU, I remember watching that game against Nevada Reno way back in week 1, and I'm like, holy cow. This SMU team is going to get rocked when they get an ACC play. And what they did is they made the quarterback change to Jennings. He's also banged up. If they have to go with Stone, you got to kind of rethink this game. So you're talking about the starting 2 quarterbacks who are both listed as questionable as we speak. And I've got to wait. If I see that you're going to get Jennings and he's going to be capable of playing, then I think 7.5 is a fair number if you like SMU here. If you're going into Saturday and neither one of these kids are cleared to play, they're both listed as a game time decision, I got to stay away from the game. But to say they're the fake team, undefeated team right now, I won't go that far. I will give SMU some credit here. They had a -6 turnover ratio against Duke in their last game, -6, and they still found a way to win the game. They had to go to overtime, but they won the game. That's almost impossible at -6. So, Again, I think SMU is the right side. You just got to wait and see if Jennings is going to be able to go.
Rob, did we lose you? You shut your camera off? Either that or I noticed he was doing some stuff. So who knows?
He didn't like a reference to the fake college football team or whatever.
He probably didn't. I'll keep his camera up there just in case he joins us back in, because it's just kind of fun to see his. I kind of there you go. Where did you go?
I had to take a quick phone call. Turned out to be nothing emergent.
It'd been funnier if you would have said you had to take a piss or something. I mean, that would have been like, hey, I got to go take a pee.
Nah, I'm on call at work, so I got the phone right here. It lights up. I got to go in.
What do you mean you got to do doctor stuff? I mean, this is doc talk right now.
Stamping out disease left and right. So, hey, are we still on Pitt SMU?
No, we can be if you want to be.
No, I literally just saw it pop up that SI.com has Holstein playing.
Oh, really?
I just got a text from somebody too saying that he's now been upgraded.
Okay, yeah, I popped it up right here. Pitt gets starting quarterback back versus SMU. Yeah. So Eli Holstein.
The SMU story is kind of intriguing to me. Maybe it's because we're old guys, right? And so that nostalgia of the death penalty and the years of suffering that program went through.
I'm not sure that's nostalgia, Travis.
Well, I mean, that's not. But I think we all remember the death penalty when it was handed down.
Yeah.
But to see them move into the ACC and have the success they're having. And let's not forget, they forfeited their payment, right? I mean, SMU's not getting paid media rights. They wanted in a big league so badly. They said, hey, just let us in. We'll play. That shows you how much money they have down there. But it's kind of fun to watch them have some success. At least it is for me.
Who's their coach? I don't even know who SMU's coach is.
Who is it? I don't even know either. I should know this.
Well, because Sonny left and went to TCU.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't answer that, Rob. Sorry. I should know that, but I don't.
Can you guys see or hear me, by the way?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. I just missed whatever was said in the last 2 minutes.
Oh. Okay. Now, we were just talking about you had Sonny Dykes down there at SMU, who kind of seemed like he was the guy that really kind of got it rolling. And I thought they were going to crash and burn when he left and went to TCU, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, Rhett Lashley, if that's what you're asking about.
Yeah, I have no idea who
that's the coach.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have no idea who that is.
He's been there for a couple of years now, but they've been, they fly under the radar before they got to the ACC. And I was saying when we lost you there for a second, Rob, that watching SMU in that week 1 game against Nevada Reno, when they looked like they were just so overvalued and overrated, going to have a real rough year in the ACC compared to the offensive adjustments and bringing in Jennings, with Lashley making those decisions, it's a situation where they're just a totally different team than they were in week 1. They almost got beat up at Reno, by a guy in his first game that he was coaching for Reno. And it was a weird game. But anyway, I wanted to mention real quickly, I had dinner a couple of times. Last time, he's passed away now, but a few years ago with Ron Meyer, the former SMU coach. Had dinner with him at Caesar's Palace one time, and I forget where else another time when he came up to Vegas, talking about how hard it was for coaches after the death penalty to be able to recruit for 15 years at SMU, despite being in such a great location. Now that they're in and of course the conferences that they've been affiliated with since all that broke up, 40 years ago, the Southwest Conference or whatever it was. But it's a situation now where they go to the ACC, they can finally start getting some recruits too, on top of getting a good coach and holding on to him. He's been there for 3 years. If they can hang on to him, which I believe they will, then you got a situation where your recruiting is strong, you've got a good coaching staff, and you can go out and compete for the ACC crown. They might get there this year. They got a game coming up with Clemson, just got to get past Pittsburgh here.
All right, this one's for Scott. And Kodiak Bear says, I've been losing my ass on the NFL this year. College football has been saving grace. Has the NFL been weird this year, or am I just really bad at this? Let me answer the question first. You might have a problem, Kodiak, because you paid $4.99 to have that comment put on the show. So it just tells me you might have this sick obsession of losing money. Call me crazy, but you paid $4.99 for me to put that comment up.
It's interesting because does it say when they comment that you have to drop a payment? I mean, it's
no, you can. And I didn't know this. Owen informed me like there are like super commenters. Like if you want to guarantee that your comment gets on, you can drop some money. Now we don't promote that because we're not here. I mean, we're not getting rich doing this. We're just doing it because we like it. But if somebody wants to pay $4.99 a comment, we'll take it, right? But
Kodiak Bear obviously believes in capitalism. I've got no problem with that, So, but as far as the NFL and a weird season, it just seems like there's so many haves and have-nots. I mean, we busted out of the season watching, these teams cashing that were getting points, a certain amount of points cashing every week. Not having a problem cashing winning outright, teams that you wouldn't expect to do so. We saw this influx of rookie quarterbacks not throw a touchdown pass through the first 2 weeks, even though there were like 5 or 6 rookie quarterbacks. So you had like 5 or 6 teams that hadn't even thrown a touchdown pass, the first couple of weeks. It has been a bit of a weird season. It's still the same at the top, man. You still got the Kansas City Chiefs. You've still got, over the last couple of years, including this year, the Detroit Lions. I think the biggest surprise to me, guys, has been the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I did not expect this team to have anything like they have. They always say, okay, well, Mike Tomlin never has a losing season. Great. And he's always sitting at home after round 1 of the postseason, or he's not making it last year to the playoffs, whatever it was. They have been terrific. And this guy got Russell Wilson to start playing real, legitimate starting quarterback again. Mike Tomlin is the man. And I'm not even a Steelers fan. So
now Tomlin does have a Super Bowl title, correct?
Yes, he does. It's just been a little bit, lately.
I mean, how hard is it to? I mean, unless you're the Chiefs or the Patriots, it's amazingly hard to win a Super Bowl. I mean, it's brutally hard. I mean, the fact that you got a guy who really has never had a winning season, and he's taken a team to a Super Bowl title. If I'm an ownership, and the Steelers' ownership is classically like this, I'm never getting rid of that guy. Yeah. Which, I mean, they've gone from what? Chuck Noll to Cower to Mike Tomlin. Yep. So you've got 3 guys who pretty much
in our lifetime, right?
Yes. I think I looked up a stat once. I think the Steelers, I think it's since 1969, the Steelers have had 3 coaches.
Oh, it's amazing. And, I've used them as an example in the past a few years ago when everybody could relate a little bit more to the New York Islanders of the 80s. But when I talk about teams and organizations having their identities, the 3 that come to mind, the Montreal Canadiens when they were winning all the Stanley Cups, the New York Islanders with Butch Goring and Billy Smith in net, those teams are the same every year. And then you've got the Pittsburgh Steelers because of the fact that they get a coach, they're going to give him a shot, and if he's winning, they hang on to him forever. And so, Mike Tomlin is having this resurgence this year. And all of a sudden, in the last few weeks, this guy he's out coaching everybody that he's facing.
Which also seems like, to play at that level? I mean, I always thought Tomlin also seemed like the most likable guy on the planet too. So he's one of those coaches guys watch and go like, well, okay, well, I'd kind of like to play for that guy.
Oh, absolutely. So, him and Tommy.
Plus that defense is real. I mean, they've rebuilt that defense. I mean, when you look at Watt, you look at Highsmith. I mean, it's like that's a hell of a defense they've got playing there in Pittsburgh right now.
And it's funny that I remember like being on the field before a weekend preseason game here in Las Vegas. And I thought, man, there's two guys I could play for in my life and never have a problem. Now, of course, they wouldn't be on the team, but would be Tommy Lasorda and Mike Tomlin. I mean, they're just unbelievable coaches. They are players coaches, but they're also going to hold you to the fire if you're out there playing like a chump. You're not going to get away with taking a week off, so to speak. And I can imagine what a guy like Mike Tomlin would have done to the Chicago Bears defensive back who was jawing with the fans after the play started the other night. He misses to kind of block off the receiver coming across. He misses that, and then he's the one that tips the ball that's caught in the end zone. And, you see Bears fans pointing to him. The play started, and he's jawing again. Man, I'm telling you what, that kid wouldn't be playing for about a month for me, and I think Tomlin would be kind of the same way.
All right, jump back into the games. We're going to the Big Ten now. Our last three games going to be all in the Big Ten. The battle for the Heartland Trophy in Iowa City. Wisconsin taking on Iowa. Iowa going with a new starting quarterback this week. Is Brendan Sullivan's going to be the starting quarterback. Cade McNamara has a concussion. He won't even suit up. The Hawkeyes a 3-point favorite. Over under at 40.5 here. Yeah,
Brandon Sullivan. He had thrown 2 passes all season. Goes into the Northwestern game. It's 9 of 14. Didn't have a pick. Guys, I don't pick on college players. I really don't. So I'm going to mean this and not be picking on a guy. When you talk about Cade McNamara, he just looks like one of those kids that came out of high school with all that hype and promise. He just didn't have it to get to that next level when he was at Michigan and also here at Iowa. He just doesn't have whatever that last gear is to take him to the level, to the potential he had, or we all heard he had when he came out of college. It just happens sometimes. And I think McNamara is one of those guys. So if you look at what's going on here, Wisconsin's win over Rutgers, Northwestern, and Purdue don't mean much now. Those 3 teams have fallen off a cliff. Locke's an average quarterback. I'm watching Aller last week for Penn State go down, and then Pribula comes in, and they combined to complete 25 of 31 passes. And then Penn State moved the ball like a hot knife through butter on Wisconsin with their backup quarterback. So listen, I like Iowa here. I think they get the job done. One thing about Sullivan is he looks like he's capable of extending plays at the very least and taking off and doing a little bit of damage with his legs where McNamara couldn't. In modern day college football, you don't have to run for 60, 70 yards if you're quarterback, but you got to be able to at least extend plays. Well, they might have that now with Sullivan.
What I liked about Sullivan, and if you guys go back and watch the Iowa game, that he threw a pass to Johnny Pascuzzi, who's a tight end, and he ended up, Rob, you would have loved this as an offensive lineman. He ended up being the lead blocker. He took off and on a dead sprint, he threw it to Pascuzzi, passed him, threw a massive block at going 100 miles an hour, and Pascuzzi got an extra 10 yards. I mean,
how big a guy is he?
Oh, he's not very big. I mean, he's tall, but he's not thick, right? So, but he's got wheels. He's got some wheels. I mean, it was just a different energy for that Iowa offense. But I mean,
you and I talked about this a little bit last Sunday, that it's just all of a sudden there's now a threat.
Yes.
I mean, he doesn't have to run, but the threat's there.
Here's a good stat for you. And I'm close here. But when McNamara was in the game, who's not a running threat, Caleb Johnson, who's one of the best running backs in the country, had like four carries for 7 yards.
I think that's right. I think that's what you
and then Sullivan comes in. He ends the game with 12 or 14 carries for 114 yards. I mean, that just how much it opened the running game for Iowa. It's just a sick number when you have a mobile quarterback.
Can you imagine McNamara? You're going to fall for McNamara keeping the ball. When he does a fake. I mean, you're just not going to care. And it's like now you have to pay attention to both potential ball carriers. And again, we saw so. And again, for me also, you got to be able to extend plays when things when your receivers aren't getting any separation. And there's a little bit of a pass rush. You don't have to take off and run down the field, but you got to be able to at least run parallel and give your receivers a chance to be able to get some separation. And just McNamara is just not able to do that. He's like, he probably would have been even better in 1981, but football's nowadays, you just got to be able to move.
The big game in the Big Ten this week is going to be Ohio State at Penn State. Ohio State, a 3.5-point favorite. This one kind of shocked me a little bit just because they were playing in Happy Valley, the way Ohio State played last week against Nebraska, or maybe Nebraska played that well. But the Buckeyes, a 3.5-point favorite. You're over under sitting at 45 here.
Yeah, first of all, if you look at the power ratings before last week's games were played, before Ohio State had the close call in Columbus, Ohio State was about an 8.5-point favorite on a neutral field over Penn State. So then you tie in the whatever you think the home field advantage is at Happy Valley and all that kind of stuff. But I'll tell you why they're struggling. I mean, they ran all over Michigan State. They ran all over the Iowa Hawkeyes in their first two Big Ten games. They gained 388 yards on the ground in those two games at over 5 yards per pop. But now you take out one 53-yard run against Oregon by Travion Henderson, and the Buckeyes have rushed for 152 yards,
Wow.
2.4 yards per carry in their other 63 rushing attempts against Nebraska and Oregon. It's offensive left tackle Josh Simmons, guys. They don't have anybody who could play anywhere close to his level. He got banged up in that Oregon game, and they've not been able to run the football since they lost him. They've tried a couple of different guys at left tackle. They got a good left guard, but at left tackle, they're struggling big time. And I don't know how they can, change that this week against a good Penn State team. If Ohio State's completely healthy, if Josh Simmons is healthy and out there starting and playing up to his norm, first of all, I don't think Nebraska comes as close to Ohio State last week. Secondly, I'd be laying 3.5 at the Buckeyes. I can't do it because they can't run the football right now.
And that was watching the Nebraska game. That left tackle spot was a glaring weakness for Ohio State. So, I mean, Nebraska, I think both sacks came off. The two sacks they had both came off of that kid. So
yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. You've got an NFL player, maybe a first rounder in Simmons, and then all of a sudden you have that big drop off to guys who haven't had much experience, and they're just not anywhere as close as good as Simmons. And you see the big drop off. I will say this. I've talked about this before. I think we've talked about it. When we mentioned Penn State games. When James Franklin is coaching a big game, it gets a little scary to have that ticket with Penn State written on it at the sports book because he has not done well. And they're 0-8 straight up and 2-6 against the spread as an underdog with Franklin at the helm. They don't beat the Buckeyes. Maybe they will this year. If they're going to do it, I'm a Will Howard fan. But again, without his left tackle, I don't know that they're going to be able to operate offensively like they normally would have with Simmons up front.
I screwed the graphic up, so I'm not going to put it up. But Nebraska is at home to play UCLA this weekend. The Huskers a 6.5-point favorite. Did I see this thing drop, Scott? I looked on Wednesday or on Monday. This thing was sitting at like 8.5. It's at 6.5 now. Why the drop? And who do you like in this game?
It was mostly sevens. But it's most, the good books were about 7. They've dropped it to 6.5. Guys, it's so easy to go against Nebraska when they're laying points, right? For the last decade. But this is one of those spots where in my gut and in my handicapping, I think they get the job done this week. That's such a momentum builder. They always say there's no moral victories, but I like when Rule came out and he goes, we finally saw a team with a championship attitude in the locker room. And so I think they can build off of that. Obviously, you've got situations up front on the offensive line that make it extremely tough to lay points with this team. And you ask most sharps in the business, and they'll tell you that UCLA has probably played the most difficult schedule of college football this season.
It's brutal.
So you got that going for you also. It's been tough. I was looking at some of their numbers before last week. UCLA had scored 87 points in their prior 6 games, 59 rushing yards per game, 2.4 per carry, 5 touchdown passes, 9 picks, sacked 17 times in those previous 6 games. And even in the win over Rutgers, if you take away a 49-yard run by Garbers that you guys talked about on the air the other day on a scramble, and then you take that away and UCLA gained 46 yards rushing on 30 planned carries. That's it. Not even 2 yards per pop. So Rutgers has fallen off a cliff since they lost to Nebraska. So I don't know how much that win means for UCLA. It's a win and they got to take it. But then the bye week comes right as the Bruins might have got some confidence. That injection of, wow, we got some rhythm on offense now. Garber's starting to potentially take off with the ball when things break down, and he's not as slow as he looks when he's on the sideline. Nebraska's posted solid defensive numbers, some of the top 20 in college football metrics that you can find. And I look at UCLA and I'm thinking, boy, their defense, second to last in pass defense. I am down on Nebraska's offensive line, but Raiola should get enough protection to where he can have his biggest game of the season. I truly believe that passing wise. And again, I'm just not sold on UCLA being able to knock off Rutgers. I don't think it's that big of a deal. No, I don't drink the Kool-Aid. I never do that. I
There
never
it
drink
is.
the Kool-Aid.
It's the last sign of the apocalypse. Scott's drinking the Kool-Aid.
I never drink. I got water, but I never drink the Kool-Aid. I've been betting for too long to drink I got my ass kicked a few times in the early '90s drinking Kool-Aid, but anyway, it's that spot where I think UCLA got a tough break by a bye week. As stupid as that sounds.
No,
And,
okay. That's been like my argument all along with Nebraska going into that Indiana game. I was like, God, I don't like bye weeks. I hate bye weeks. I don't think this is good. We're going to hit it really well. And like I said, we weren't sure exactly what we were going to see from Indiana, but I'm sitting here going, we got a pretty well-coached team in Indiana, and we're coming off of a bye week. Rhythm's going to be off. They're going to be over-focused on some stuff. If they're not able to make adjustments, this could go south really fast.
Here's the cool thing about drinking I got to tell the guy who I didn't see his name there, who chimed in, which I love the comment.
That was Brian again.
That was Brian. He's
I love the
back every
comment,
week.
Brian. I was going to say the real cool thing about modern day betting is you have in-game betting, and you can pour that Kool-Aid down your sink real fast and jump on the other side in betting to get out of a bad bet. Unfortunately, the people who listen to me can't. So, and I hate that. But, if Nebraska's looking stupid and sluggish on offense, you might start looking at some in-game betting against them.
David says, I haven't bet on Nebraska since Bo was the coach, and even when I did, it was never against Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan, or Minnesota. So people have their little rhythms of what they don't want to bet on. Hey, if you've liked what you've heard from Scott Spreitzer tonight, guess what? You can work with Scott on a regular basis. All you have to do is text the word Doc Talk to the number 29022 and get the free $60 trial of the premium member picks from Scott, or visit DocSports.com. Sign up for the free 60 on the upper left-hand side of the website. Of course, you've got college football this week, but also college basketball getting underway. That means your life is now over till what, April? About April is when your life gets back on track?
Around the Final Four in college basketball is what I actually get to come up for air. So it's pretty busy. I was telling Travis, Doc, Rob, before the show that next summer after the NBA Finals, I'm heading out of town. We're going to go over to China, Taiwan, and Japan for about 4 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And I can't wait, because I'm telling you, man, when it gets to the Final Four, I mean, the gas is on low. It's like, it's just not there at that point. So to take a few days off, like, I don't even really bet baseball for the first 10 days of the season. I'm like, I got 3 or 4 NBA games a night. I ain't worried about baseball. I got to regather, take my breath. So I expect to come back awfully refreshed next year and for football season. But
what I hear you saying is you're probably just going overseas, not for vacation, but scout that Korean League baseball, so you know exactly how to bet.
Of course. And also a little bit of, maybe catch some horse racing in Manila where they run opposite, instead of running this way, they run that way, But it's funny. I've got to catch some fights. I mean, legalized fights over in Thailand. I got to catch some fights. So it's been about 30 years since I've been in Southeast Asia and the Far East, and it'll be fun to go back with the family this time. I didn't have a family last time.
Well, and I was going to say, does your wife have family over there?
Yeah, she's got her brother and sister live in Vegas now, but her brother's back in China for about 3 months taking care of her dad's pushing 90. But she's got uncles, aunts, her dad's still around, and they've been here a few times. And so, yeah, we'll be visiting with them, all that kind of stuff, and eating like crazy. I'm going to come back after summer weighing 350. I'm going to call Travis for his this awesome diet that he's been on.
I hit 190 today. I'm down to 190 now.
That's the lowest you've weighed since you started this?
Oh, Rob, I haven't weighed 190 probably since college.
Wow.
When I lost so much weight back in 2008, 2009, I got down to about 195. I hit 190 today. I was actually kind of surprised. I dropped about 4 pounds this week, and I was like, damn.
Last time I weighed 190 was probably 8th grade.
I would have guessed 6th.
I was kind of a tall, lanky kid up until I kind of discovered the weight room as a freshman in high school, and it kind of took off from there. But I mean, prior to then, I was like a vertical rail walking around.
All right. People want to know, Scott. James says you're going to the cockfights. Is that what you're going? You're going to the cockfights?
No, I don't really get into that. I went into that in Mexico once. I that is pretty funny, and I hope he's being legit there and not being too funny. But I used to go to Mexico quite a bit. This is the difference between 2024 and 1994. I would jump in my car in Las Vegas, drive down to San Diego, visit my oldest brother and his family, and then jump back in my car, head into Tijuana, buy some Mexican auto insurance that I could have for, a week or however long I was going to be there, and then drive deep into Baja, Mexico, or go down into the mainland of Mexico, and have a blast to be down there for 10 days, whatever. Get lost on the way back to the border, have no clue where I am, and still not feel any problems. I mean, it was so cool back in the day when I was growing up. And but I went to one outside of Ensenada, of what your buddy just mentioned there. And it was tough to watch. But my gosh, the betting going on, holy cow. I wish I would have brought cards with me. I would have been passing them out in Ensenada.
Shuck says, hey, Scott, I've never been to Vegas. Good place to stay. Anywhere on the Strip, right? I mean, Circa.
It's okay. The Strat is in an area where if you're wandering around at night and it's 1 a.m, they call it the Naked City, that area. And it's so just, take a cab or Uber or whatever. But I wouldn't walk around more than 2 blocks west of the Strip if I was staying in the Strat. It's a little spooky there. Anywhere else on the Las Vegas Strip, you're fine.
Circa's a good place to stay, right? I mean, they've got that pool out front.
Oh my gosh. And if you're guys that like sports, Derek Stevens, I mean, this guy's a sports bettor who now owns the Circa Hotel and a couple more. And I've talked to him a few times, and you'll see him around the hotel having a glass of scotch or bourbon, walking around talking to people. It's like he's the owner of the Circa and the D and a couple of others. He is the exact, I guess, poster owner for the way it was when I first got to Vegas. You would see hotel owners mixing with people, hanging out, having a drink. Derek Stevens is like a throwback to those days.
You remember, Rob, we met Derek. He was over in Remember we did the appearance over in Council Bluffs, all the Circa guys.
I do remember that.
Yeah. So
Mike Palm, I think he was with him probably.
Yeah, Palm was there.
Yep. Yeah.
The Circa is a great place. You stay on the Strip anymore, and the Cosmopolitan's a great place to stay. It gets a little expensive and pricey, but you can walk anywhere on the Strip once you get down around the Cosmopolitan, the Bellagio, without any worries. Just if you go to the Strat, stay on the Strip, take a cab towards the main part of the Strip, and you'll be okay.
All right, that's going to wrap up. Have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do so. It's very simple. Just hit the subscribe button. You can leave comments even after we're off the air, or you can also send Dr. Rob and I an email, doctalksports@gmail.com. That's doctalksports@gmail.com. For Scott Spreitzer, for Dr. Rob Zatechka, I'm Travis Justice. We will see you next week on Behind the Point Spread.